We always mention the question, if God is absolute, God is infinite, that means there's no past, there's no present, there's no future. God exists, spans all existence simultaneously. We don't understand, as the Rambam says, if the future hasn't yet taken place, how could God be in the future? But if you accept the fact that God is infinite, there's no beginning, there's no end, that means God's in the future already. So we have a question. So we haven't yet experienced the future. How could God be in the future? Since we're finite beings, there's certain things which are beyond the capacity of a human being even to fathom or to comprehend. And the Rambam says we don't understand it. But factually, God pre-existed existence. He created the whole context of existence. And therefore, he spans the world or whatever it is from beginning till the end because he's infinite. Now, so he asked the question, what is the value of man's actions? Why are you credible and deserving if you do make the right decision? Because you chose to do the right thing. And why are you culpable if you did the wrong thing? Because you choose the wrong thing. So the question which is asked, which is a baseless question, if you think about it, if God knows the future and he knows you're going to sin, you have no choice. Where's your choice? It's like destined you should sin because he knows the future. That's a question people ask. But if you reflect on the question for a moment, you realize the question is a baseless question. Why is it a baseless question? God has no bearing. It says everything's predestined except for one's free choice. One's fear of heaven, that's not predestined. That's up to each individual. You want to choose to be a tzaddik, devoutly righteous, that's within your availability. You want to, God forbid, choose to be evil, that's also available to you. You're born in the equidistant point between both poles, you choose to go whichever direction you want. But if God knows the future, and he knows and he sees you sinned, do you have a chance? You have no choice. The answer is no. What God knows, he sees your choice. God knows your choice because God's in the future. So the question is, but if we're not in the future yet, how could he see my choice? That's the $64,000 question. That's something he can't fathom that. So we have full choice. God knowing the future or being in the future has nothing to do with in any way infringing or minimizing our free choice. Okay, there's a very important principle. Now, if you read the story of creation, he created Adam and Eve, put them in the Garden of Eden, and he said to them, all the fruits of the tree of the garden are available to you, except there's one tree, the tree of knowledge. That you're not permitted to have fruit, and the day that you will eat, you will die, meaning you'll be subject to death. And if you don't eat, you're eternal. If you do eat, you become a finite being, and everything is to follow. What we're experiencing for nearly 6,000 years is everything that followed. Because since he failed, he minimized the world, he putrefied the world. God's relation with the world is a different relationship than it would have been if he would have withstood the test not to eat of the tree of knowledge. If he wouldn't have eaten of the tree of knowledge, what would have been? The existence that existed was pre-existent. He created that to exist. All creation was created at the beginning of creation. God created two scenarios. If you succeed, there's one scenario. So he created that existence, which is eternity, which has no deficiency, no relevance to putrefaction. But if you fail, you need a new system. So God had to create another system to accommodate humanity and the objective creation if Adam should fail. So since God from day one understands every nuance of every moment of existence till the end of time, he created that system to accommodate every detail, every nuance of success and failing within the spiritual realm. So whatever systems are employed now and activated now, those systems are in place because God was aware of every moment at every time till the end of time, what's needed to direct the world to its final destination, and its objective of completion. That's the understanding. Because God saw all the tzaddikim from day one. Because God knows exactly what's going to be. And evil. And based on that, and no tzaddik is perfect. So there's always peaks and valleys. The Jews we've had our peaks and valleys. We had the destruction of temples. We had displacements. We had exiles. We had endless suffering, Holocaust. But that was all part of the original equation that God created the world, that if in fact you fall to a certain level, there is Holocaust. If you succeed, then you have King Solomon, builds a temple, reigns the world supreme. The Jewish people are seen as the elite of humanity. But if they should fail, we go off the cliff. And how do we look in the eyes of the world? How are we treated by the people of the world? All these various responses and reactions and predicaments and circumstances were predestined that if that situation should happen, this is the way it manifests itself. But that was part of creation from the first moment of creation till the end of time. We find there was 2 sets of tablets. Moshe spends 40 days and 40 nights in heaven receiving the Torah on behalf of the Jewish people. While he's in heaven, God says, you must go down immediately. Your people have become corrupted. They're doing idolatry. Moshe comes down, smashes the tablets. From day one or pre-day one, did God know Moshe would break the tablets? Of course he knew. Because God knows the future. And he saw the choice of the Jews that they chose to fail. God created a scenario that they could fail. Because if there's no basis to fail, you don't fail. Moshe ascends. He supplicates God for forgiveness. Comes down with a second set of tablets. And now we need a Mishkan. If not for the sin of the golden calf, we would not need that medium to have a relation with God. But because we did fail, God originally set it in place, we should have that medium, which is called Mishkan, which is called temple. God says, I make for me a Mishkan, should dwell in your midst. Through that medium, we'll have that relationship. It's an arm's length relationship compared to what initially would have been. But because you failed, now it's arm's length. But all that, those dynamics were set in place from day one or pre-day one, that if these things should manifest themselves, they're there to accomplish, to ultimately, we should reach the same destination. The world will achieve a level of perfection. The world ultimately will be eternal, and the people who merit will be part of that eternity. As Adam would have been part of the eternity if he wouldn't be the tree of knowledge on the first day that he was created. That's a basic principle. If known, an alcoholic, if he even smells the whiskey, he's exposed to any alcoholic beverage, he can't control himself. An addict, because he has the substance in his being, in his body, this foreign substance, whenever he starts craving, either he goes into withdrawal, but if he has that drug available, he's taking that drug. As brilliant, as intelligent may be, he loses control. Loses control. And I could write, and especially if I'm educated in drug addiction, I could write you a scenario to dot every I and cross every T. What's going to happen if that drug addict, within the next week, if there's drugs available, without a question, he's taking those drugs. Because within this time period, he definitely will crave, and he'll have to satisfy that addiction. So I knew what's going to be. So if I knew what he's going to do, does that mean he didn't have choice? He didn't have choice because he's an addict. That's why he didn't have choice. But me knowing what the scenario was going to be has no bearing on his choice or his action. Same thing. God knows what we're going to do, but we're not addicts. We're not addicted to evil. We can control ourselves. So God's knowing has no bearing on what we choose and what decision we make tomorrow, whenever we make that decision in our lives. However, there's one time where God dictated a person's behavior where the man had no choice. Who was that? That was Pharaoh. Pharaoh in Egypt. Moshe comes as God's agent, proves that he's God's agent beyond any doubt. The 10 plagues, the first 5 were undeniably God's hand. Pharaoh, the Egyptian king, acted with defiance, with arrogance. He says, I don't have to listen to God. But you can't deny this is the hand of God. This is the hand of the Creator. Choice is a privilege. That's a privilege, to be able to have choice. What happens if you abuse a privilege? You know what God does? God withdraws that privilege. So therefore you find after the first 5 plagues, the Torah says, God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. He had no choice. Although he didn't have choice, he's held culpable as if he did have choice. Why? Because it was his choice not to have choice. I'll give you an example. You have a child, has privileges, and he abuses the privileges. The father says to his son, one more time, I'm withdrawing all your privileges. The child has a tantrum. The father's cruel, the father's bad, the father's this, and he's kicking, screaming. Is the father cruel? Why does the child not have privileges anymore? Father took them away. But what was the cause why he took them away? Because the child didn't behave, because he abused those privileges. Having choice, despite all the inclinations, God gives you the power to take control. What happens if you abuse it? God says, you know something? I'm withdrawing it. You could have, and you didn't use it, and you were irresponsible. Now you're going to be on your own. On your own, you can't survive it. But you're the cause of being on your own. Therefore, you treat it today. You chose to be on your own. The example I always give: a person, God forbid, wants to commit suicide, and he steps off a roof. Before you step off the roof, you have choice. Are you going to live or are you going to die? The moment the person goes off the roof, at that moment, what happens? He's not living. He no longer has choice, because he can't withdraw his decision to go back on the rooftop. But when he dies, why did he die? Because he chose to commit suicide. He chose to forfeit his life. That's what it is. I'm telling this, if it was deliberate, not where the man had some kind of chemical disorder and that's why he took his life. Just factually speaking, once he steps off that rooftop, he no longer has choice. But nevertheless, he took his life because he put himself in a position where it's impossible to withdraw that choice and everything's over. The same thing. But us, until we pass away, God forbid, whatever that will be, it should be in years to come. And we should merit to see Mashiach before it happens. Every moment of our life, every nuance of our behavior, we have control, we have the ability to make choices. And everything is evaluated. Because God knows that we have choice and gives us choice. However, he knows what that choice is. And therefore, we're held culpable and responsible or accredited if we make the right choice and we invest our lives properly. That's bottom line. But initially, God had to create 2 systems. If Adam succeeds, it's one system. If he fails, it's another system. Today, we're working on plan B, not plan A. The ultimate would have been plan A. Unfortunately, Adam made the wrong choice. Due to his own choice, there's plan B. So every eventuality for the past 6,000 years nearly is addressed, and the world responds and reacts based on every one of those choices of all humanity. Because God knows every human being that's coming into existence, how that person will affect existence through every one of their choices. It sounds complicated, but it's not. For God, nothing's complicated. You have 8.5 billion people in this world. They're all making choices. They all have consumption. Based on that choices, the behavior, this world rises and falls to whatever degree based on the result of those actions. However, what causes the world to advance or regress is only the behavior of the Jew. Only the Jew. The world was created for the Jewish people. It was not created for the nation of the world. Why? Because we had an ancestor who was called Avraham Avinu. And the world rejected God. It was a paganistic world. They were out to destroy Avraham because he was professing and disseminating monotheism. Because Avraham gave his life and advanced himself and withstood 10 tests, he merited to be the father of Judaism, the founding father of the Jewish people, which ultimately will meet the objective of creation, which was Sinai. As a result of us, if the world was created for the Jewish people, because that's the Torah, and we infuse the world with that energy to advance it or to reverse it, therefore, the Jewish people, we cause the world to rise and fall. The nations of the world, it's all on a personal level. They fail, they personally culpable. But on the world scene, they don't make a difference whether the world rises up or falls. That's all based on the behavior of the Jewish people. It says that illness should only have relevance to the Jewish people. Suffering should only have relevance to the Jewish people. Why? Because the nations of the world, they don't have that relationship with God. If they're exceptional, they could. Known as the devoutly righteous Gentile. But they come in on the Jews' coattails. But they have no direct relation with God. So therefore, there's no culpability. If they fail, they're not part of eternity. The Jew, the world here is only a means to an end. So if you misuse or misappropriate the means, so there are consequences. Because God withdraws from us. And if we utilize it properly, then he becomes intimate with us. And he gives us the ability to advance it further. But if we take what he gives us and we abuse it, we misappropriate it, what does he do? He withdraws. These are the peaks and valleys of existence. So all illness and disease really only has relevance to the Jews. So if that's the case, only Jews should become sick, God forbid, and only Jews should be diseased. You know why? Because if only Jews would be diseased and become ill, you know what they're going to say? The world, the Jewish people are cursed people. They're a diseased people. It will be Chil Hashem. It'll be a disgrace in God's name. Therefore, God spreads it to everybody. Every human being is subject to illness. Every human being is subject to disease. They contract disease the way the Jews contracts the disease. Because otherwise, it'll be a Chil Hashem. But in reality, in real time, their behavior has no relevance to the world. So if there's a problem in the world, it's because the Jew created that problem. And if there's blessing to the world, it's the Jew infused the world with a certain level of energy, which is the source and the basis of that blessing.